Okay, we'll resume. The question is that Amendment 91 be agreed to, and members should cast their votes now. And the vote is now closed. Point of order, Claire Baker.
Thank you, President Officer. I've had trouble connecting. I'm assuming this is Amendment 91 and I would vote no.
Thank you, Ms Baker. I'll show that is recorded. Point of order, Stephanie Callaghan.
Thank you, President Officer. I would have voted yes.
Thank you, Ms Callaghan. I'll ensure that is recorded. The result of the vote on Amendment 91 in the name of the Minister is yes 92, no 15. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore agreed. I call Amendments 6, 7, 8, all in the name of the Minister, all previously debated with Amendment 91. I'd like the Minister to move Amendments 6 to 8 en bloc.
Moved.
Thank you. Does any member object to a single question being put on questions 6 to 8? No member objects. Therefore, the question is that Amendments 6 to 8 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 92 in the name of Ros McCall, already debated with Amendment 91. Ros McCall, to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 92 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 93 in the name of the Minister, already debated with Amendment 91. Minister, to move formally.
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 93 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 9 in the name of the Minister, already debated with Amendment 91. Minister, to move formally.
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 9 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Thank you. That takes us to Group 2, Provision of Accommodation and Continuing Care. I call Amendment 99 in the name of Martin Whitfield. Group with amendments as shown in the groupings. Martin Whitfield to move Amendment 99 and speak to other amendments in the group. Mr Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I have the privilege of having all amendments within this group, so I look forward to comments from others around the chamber. There are essentially two elements that sit within Group 2. The first is in relation to Amendments 98 to 107 and 144. And I sought to draft these amendments, 99 and 102, of which the others are really simply consequentials, to highlight the importance of the provisions of this bill within the scope of UNCRC. The Chamber will be aware of the many efforts that have been taken since the passing of the UNCRC bill to ensure that our legislation, which has had assurances from the Scottish Government on many occasions, would take into account pre-devolution matters so that our young people can enforce their rights in a simple and straightforward way. And the purposes behind these amendments is to do that. It is to provide a legal landscape around these children in care that urgently needs simplification, a key ask of the promise, and the legislation has failed to deliver on. This bill is anything but simple, and the next session of the Parliament will have to look, which may indeed look very drastically different in those that come here, but will have to drastically and urgently look again at this session. And the purposes behind these amendments was to bring to the forefront again the importance of UNCRC, which this Parliament and this Scottish Government absolutely agree, but to start to see some evidence of that in legislation. Amendment 108 approaches in a different way, and I am fully aware that there is a dichotomy and a challenge between Amendment 108 and other amendments that sit in this group, and I look forward to hearing from the Minister and perhaps others on whether or not we can resolve the challenge. Amendment 108 builds on the provisions that were introduced by Nicola Sturgeon at Stage 2, and it seeks to introduce a clear and unambiguous right for young people who have left a care setting to return. If this Parliament is serious about acting as a parent to children in care, then this is one of the bare minimum standards that we should look at to reach and to achieve. The idea that members' own children are unable to return to home as a parent is unthinkable for so many people. But this is the reality that care-experienced young people face. And this amendment, alongside those introduced by Nicola Sturgeon, would be a transformational step towards ensuring that every care-experienced young person can grow up safe, can grow up respected, and actually grow up loved, a word first introduced as a concept into legislation embodied in the promise. And I will move the amendments in my name.
Thank you. And I call Nicola Sturgeon.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Amendments in this group relate to sections 2, A, B, C and D of the bill, and as Martin Whitfield has said, these sections reflect amendments in my name that were passed at stage 2. I'm very grateful to the Minister for accepting these amendments at stage 2, despite, I know, some reservations, and for not seeking to reverse these at stage 3. I'm also very grateful to the Promise Scotland for all of their hard work in this area. These provisions represent significant improvements in care for vulnerable young people as they start to move on from care. They ensure that any person under the age of 18 who is homeless or in accommodation unsuitable for their welfare will be accommodated by a local authority as a child, not routed through adult homelessness services or, worse, given no help at all, which does happen to many 16 and 17-year-olds right now. They place a mandatory duty on local authorities in place of the current discretionary power to accommodate care-experienced young people aged 18 to 21 if their welfare requires it. Again, this ensures that any vulnerable young person whose move out of care doesn't go to plan, doesn't end up in adult homeless services. They ensure that young people who leave and then return to care remain eligible for continuing care on the same basis as those who never left, and they give local authorities a discretionary power to provide continuing care up to age 25 if they consider that necessary for a young person's welfare. Amendment 106 in Martin Whitfield's name, which I strongly support, raises this to 26, which better aligns this section with the aftercare provisions in the 2014 Children and Young People Act. Martin Whitfield's amendments in this group, which would replace sections 2A, B, C and D with rewritten provisions within the scope of the UNCRC, are well-meaning, and at first glance I was minded to support them. But as he acknowledges, they do risk unintended consequences, and more fundamentally, they are inconsistent with Amendment 108 in his name, and this amendment, in my view, is vitally important. Amendment 108 puts it beyond doubt that a care-experienced young person can return to continuing care during any period that this right applies. It means that a young person who is eligible for continuing care, but who leaves of their own accord to live independently, can return to care if things go wrong, in the way that non-care-experienced young people can go home to their parents if they hit bumps in life's road. And that goes to the very essence of the promise, ensuring that care-experienced young people, as far as humanly possible, get the same support from the state as the rest of us get within our families. The transition to adulthood is tricky for all of us. For most of us, even in adulthood, we have the option of going home to our parents when life gets tough. The Stage 2 amendments in my name, coupled with Amendments 106 and 108 in Martin Whitfield's name, take us much closer to that reality for care-experienced young people too. So I urge Parliament to support 106 and 108 and to reject, if they are moved, the other amendments in this group for the reasons I have outlined.
Thank you, and I call the Minister.
Presiding Officer, I am very grateful to Ms Sturgeon and Mr Whitfield for their engagement on this section of the bill ahead of Stage 3. Every member will wish to protect children's rights in Scotland, and I fully support the intention of bringing legislation within scope of the UNCRC Act. However, this must be done in a careful way which does not add to a further confusing and disjointed legislative landscape or give rise to unintended consequences. The level of engagement between stakeholders and committee on the bill has again highlighted what I hear from families across the country. Keeping the promise includes ensuring effective implementation of the laws that we pass here. I consider Martin Whitfield's amendments 99 to 102 to give rise, as he has acknowledged, to an unintended consequence that looked after status would be removed from children who are accommodated under the new restated Section 25 of the 95 Act. These vulnerable children would therefore no longer be entitled to vital supports, which I think we can all agree would be a negative impact on children and young people. If agreed, these amendments would necessitate consequential amendments ahead of implementation by future subordinate or primary legislation to address this specific unintended consequence. As I've said before, I am satisfied that the provisions in the bill and the relevant provisions of the 95 Act are compatible with the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Children in Scotland currently have routes under the existing legislation by which they can appeal and challenge the support they've been offered, including the right to review and appeals, access to the local authority children's rights officers, advocacy support and routes to complain to the SPSO. I therefore cannot support amendments 99 to 102, but I am happy to support Martin Whitfield's amendment 106. This allows local authorities to continue providing continuing care for young people until their 26th birthday. I also support Martin Whitfield's amendment 108, which will offer a right to return for those in continuing care, where this is the right thing for their welfare. Presiding Officer, I ask members to support amendments 106, 108, and I would ask that members vote against all other amendments in this group, if moved.
Thank you, Minister. I call Martin Whitfield to wind up. Press or withdraw Amendment 99.
I'm very grateful for the contributions in this group and indeed to Nicola Sturgeon's very articulate way of describing the situation, but also the challenge that faces young people on that cusping to adulthood without the ability to return. And can I thank the Minister for her very positive approach with regard to Amendments 106 and 108. And with nothing further to add other than waste time, which we have so little of, I would seek to withdraw Amendment 99.
Thank you, Mr Whitfield. Martin Whitfield seeks to withdraw Amendment 99. Does any member object? No member objects. Therefore, Amendment 99 is withdrawn. I call Amendment 100 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 99. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Not moved.
That is not moved. I call Amendment 101 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 99. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Not moved.
Not moved. Call Amendment 102 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 99. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Not moved.
That is not moved. We move now to Group 3, Family Group Decision Making. I call Amendment 10 in the name of the Minister, grouped with amendments as shown in the groupings. Minister to move Amendment 10 and speak to the other amendments in the group. Minister.
Presiding Officer, I welcome the opportunity to bring forward Amendment 10, but I want to thank Children First, whose advocacy for children on family group decision making has brought us to this point. In particular, discussions with Miles Briggs, Willie Rennie, Ros McCall and Martin Whitfield have allowed a coherent package of amendments to be laid. Throughout the passage of the bill, members have emphasised the importance of ensuring that families are supported to play a meaningful role in decisions affecting children and that the child's voice is heard in this process. The amendments before us reflect that shared ambition. They also build on Scotland's approach through getting it right for every child and the ambition of the promise that children should be supported to stay within their families when and wherever it is safe to do so, and that families themselves should play a meaningful role in shaping the support that surrounds them. By bringing families together to identify their strengths, family group decision making helps make that possible. I hope that members will support these amendments and extend the statutory framework around the provision of family group decision making in Scotland. The amendments before Parliament today strengthen the visibility, accessibility, consistency and national understanding of those services in 4 ways. Firstly, Amendment 10 in my name introduces a right for children and families to request that a family group decision-making service be provided. Any person considering themselves to fall within the definitions referred to in new Section 69A1 of the Children and Young People Scotland Act 2014 will be able to make the request. That request will need to be considered and responded to by a local authority unless it considers that there are good reasons not to respond. Secondly, Willie Rennie's Amendment 94 seeks to bolster Amendment 10 by making sure that local authorities promote awareness of this right to request FGDM and publish information about the service more broadly. Thirdly, Amendment 95, also from Willie Rennie, requires the publication of national guidance on family group decision-making, supporting a clearer and more consistent understanding of how to use it. Lastly, Amendment 84 from Miles Briggs seeks to strengthen national reporting with a duty on local authorities to provide information on the operation of services to the Scottish Ministers, who will collate that in a report to Parliament within 3 years of royal assent. Other amendments in this group make technical changes to ensure consistency of language when referring to family group decision-making services, but together these amendments strengthen family group decision-making in a practical, proportionate way while maintaining the flexibility needed to respond to the circumstances of each child and each family. I therefore move Amendment 10 in my name and invite members to support all of the amendments in this group.
Thank you, Minister. And I call Willie Rennie to speak to Amendment 94 and other amendments in the group. Mr Rennie.
I want to thank the Minister for her collaborative approach on this very important issue, but also Children First for their very strong support in making sure that we get this right. And family group decision-making is at the heart of the delivery of the promise as we progress forward. And I think very clearly it strengthens family networks, gives children a voice in decisions that affect them, and can help prevent situations from escalating into a crisis, which I'm sure we will all support. My amendments form part of a cross-party package in this group, and I endorse Amendment 10 in the name of the Minister on the right to request family group decision-making. My Amendment 94 will require local authorities to promote this right and to publish information more broadly about FGDM services in their area, so that what they are now and how to access them is widely understood. The collaborative approach in this group reflects the strong interest across Parliament in ensuring that families are better supported and that children's voices are heard in decisions affecting their lives. Yes,
Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful to Willie Rennie for taking the intervention. I merely want to articulate my thanks for the cross-party work, particularly with regard to this group, and confirm we'll be supporting the amendments.
Thank you, Willie Rennie.
And on that point, I will conclude and urge members to support the amendments.
Thank you. I call Miles Briggs to speak to Amendment 79 and other amendments in the group. Mr Briggs.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer, and I'm pleased to speak to the amendments in my name in this group relating to family group decision-making. And as the Minister and Willie Rennie have already pointed out, family group decision-making is a well-established approach and has been used by some local authorities in Scotland, including my own here in Edinburgh, over a number of years to bring families together to make plans for children where there are serious concerns around their well-being. And the amendments in my name focus on strengthening transparency and accountability in how family group decision-making is used and ensuring that we all tie in to the same definition of this service. My Amendment 84 would require the Scottish Ministers to publish and lay before Parliament national information on the use of FGDM within 3 years of royal assent. And this will help Parliament and the public to better understand how this important service is being provided across Scotland and where it could be strengthened. My amendments also make technical changes to reflect the definition of family group decision-making services, which is added to the Children and Young People Scotland Act of 2014 by the Minister's Amendment number 10. Importantly, my amendment forms part of a cross-party package of proposals in this group, and I believe the overall package of measures now strike the right balance. It improves visibility and understanding of family group decision-making while continuing to respect the professional judgment of those working with our children and families. Now, I welcome the constructive discussions which have taken place, both across party, but especially thank the Minister for moving this agenda forward, and also put on record my thanks to organisations supporting children and families, particularly Children First, which has long advocated for the wider use of family group decision-making. I'm pleased to speak on these amendments in my name and look forward to supporting this wider package in the group, and I move Amendment 79 in my name.
Thank you. And I call the Minister to wind up. Minister.
I've nothing further to add, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 10 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 94 in the name of Willie Rennie, already debated with Amendment 10. Willie Rennie to move or not move?
Move.
The question is that Amendment 94 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 95 in the name of Willie Rennie, already debated with Amendment 10. Willie Rennie to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 95 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Parliament is agreed. And that brings us to Group 4, kinship carers. I call Amendment 11 in the name of Jeremy Balfour, grouped with Amendment 12. Jeremy Balfour to move Amendment 11 and speak to both amendments in the group. Mr Balfour.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I can start by also thanking the Minister for her very proactive engagement. Although we won't agree on everything this afternoon and this evening, I do appreciate the way that she has reached out and her officials as well. Can I also thank all the charities and organisations who have helped shape my thinking and decision-making regarding this bill. With my Amendment 11 regarding kinship care, I especially want to thank Children First, Scotland's national children's charity, for their guidance on this amendment to ensure it is a child-centred and appropriately measured. I think it has become clear to me over this term that kinship care is a wee bit like the Cinderella service within Scotland. Those of us who sit on the Social Justice and Social Security Committee did a number of sessions with those who are involved with kinship care. And there are many issues which still need to be addressed, and the support that they need still needs to be done both by government and also local authority. But I think Amendment 11 reframes the wording of Section A1 of the bill regarding kinship care assessment needs to ensure that we remove any barriers that might be facing carers and children in kinship care arrangements. The premise of this amendment is simple. Rather than the local authority having to offer to assess the person's kinship care assistant needs, instead there's a guarantee that the assessment will take place. This takes the potential postcode lottery out of the process and ensures that the carers and child's needs are assessed appropriately and without question. Children First, in the report on the vision of kinship care published in February 2026, stated that asking carers to apply for an assessment may become a hurdle, especially those who are unaware of the option to find it difficult to ask for help. Kinship carers are the backbone of our care community. Grandparents, other relations who at a time in their lives should be enjoying perhaps retirement, relaxation, are instead stepping up and supporting and raising grandchildren, nephews, nieces, and keeping families together during difficult times. These people deserve full backing and support from our local councils to ensure a full trauma-informed assessment of the care needs is performed and pathways to assist and support are identified. Kinship carers should not have to go asking for an assessment or wait for a council to offer an assessment. Assessment should be given without hesitation or demand. Amendment 12 then follows on from this to ensure that kinship assessment is carried out within 3 months of the application being received. This will ensure that the assessment is timely and families are not left waiting and struggling. This will ensure the appropriate support, whether support is of financial, practical or professional need, such as social work support, will be put in place at the earliest opportunity and might prevent kinship care arrangements from breaking down. Kinship care for too long has been misunderstood, mismanaged and under-supported. Amendments 11 and 12 in my name go some way in ensuring that kinship carers are recognised, listened to and given the appropriate assessment of support to ensure they can care for the children and care for the best to their ability. I so move Amendment 11 in my name.
Thank you, Mr Balfour, and I call the Minister.
Presiding Officer, I understand the intention behind Mr Balfour's amendments in this group, which seek to strengthen access to assessments for kinship carers. Indeed, I have been very keen on improving and strengthening support for kinship carers throughout this entire bill process, much as I know other members have too. Section A1 of the Bill provides kinship carers with the right to request an assessment or a review of their support needs. It also creates enabling powers for Scottish ministers to create provisions on when or how a local authority must assess or review an assessment of a person's kinship care needs. Amendment 11 would change the provision from requiring local authorities to offer an assessment to requiring them to guarantee that an assessment takes place in all circumstances. But the current wording allows local authorities to respond proportionately where needs have already been assessed or where a further assessment may not be necessary, and reflects the wider principle of proportionate and minimum intervention that underpins Scotland's approach to children's services. It would mean resource being tied up in conducting assessments, whether they are needed or not, and this does not feel appropriate. Yet through A1 we already have the ability, if necessary through secondary legislation, to provide more detail on that assessment process. I hope Jeremy Balfour is assured by this and would not press Amendment 11. Amendment 12 would introduce a statutory requirement for an assessment or a review to be completed within 3 months of a request being made. I recognise the importance of ensuring that kinship carers receive timely consideration of their support needs, and on that basis I am content to support Amendment 12 because it creates a window within which assessments should be conducted. Local authorities will continue to prioritise assessments according to risk and need, and the statutory guidance referred to in these provisions will support authorities in implementing these requirements in a way that reflects local circumstances and the needs of children and families. I therefore encourage Jeremy Balfour not to press Amendment 11, but if he does, I urge members to vote against it, but members to vote for his Amendment 12.
Thank you. And I call Jeremy Balfour to wind up and press or withdraw Amendment 11. Thank you.
Nothing to add, Presiding Officer, but I still press Amendment 11.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 11 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? No. The Parliament is not agreed. There will be a division and members should cast their votes now. The vote is closed. The result of the vote on amendment number 11 in the name of Jeremy Balfour is yes 43, no 70. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I call Amendment 12 in the name of Jeremy Balfour, already debated with Amendment 11. Jeremy Balfour, to move or not move?
Move.
The question is that Amendment 12 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. I call Amendment 96 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 91. Martin Whitfield, to move or not move?
Not move.
The amendment is not moved. I call Amendment 97 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 91. Martin Whitfield, to move or not move?
Not move.
The amendment is not moved. I call Amendment 98 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 99. Martin Whitfield, to move or not move?
Not move.
Not moved. I call Amendments 13, 14 and 15, all in the name of the Minister, and all previously debated with Amendment 91, and I invite the Minister to move Amendments 13 to 15 en bloc.
Moved.
Thank you. Does any member object to a single question being put on amendments 13 to 15? No member objects. Therefore, the question is that amendments 13 to 15 are agreed to. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. I call Amendment 103 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 99. Martin Whitfield, to move or not move?
Not move.
Not moved. I call Amendment 104 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 99. Martin Whitfield, to move or not move?
Not move.
Not moved. And I call Amendment 105 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 99. Martin Whitfield, to move or not move?
Not move.
I call Amendment 106 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 99. Martin Whitfield, to move or not move?
Move.
The question is that Amendment 106 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. I call Amendment 107 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 99. Martin Whitfield, to move or not move?
Not move.
Not moved. I call Amendment 108 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 99. Martin Whitfield, to move or not move?
Move.
The question is that Amendment 108 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. We move to Group 5, Corporate Parenting, Duties and Guidance. I call Amendment 16 in the name of the Minister, grouped with amendments as shown in the groupings. I call the Minister to move Amendment 16 and speak to other amendments in the group.
Presiding Officer, I move Amendment 16 in my name, and I will speak to my own amendments 16, 17, 18, 19 and 20 first. Amendment 16 reinstates the position that corporate parenting duties and responsibilities apply up to the age of 26. This amendment is related to Amendment 19 in my name, which places a duty on the Scottish Ministers to issue guidance about corporate parenting. This guidance may include advice and information on when and how it may be desirable for corporate parents, insofar as they are acting within their powers, to continue their corporate responsibilities towards people aged 26 and over who were formerly looked after. Amendments 18 and 19 remove and reinsert amendments that were agreed at Stage 2 with minor technical and consequential fixes. Amendments 17 and 20 remove provisions that were inserted into the bill at Stage 2, which would most commonly affect unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and young people. These related to corporate parenting responsibilities in relation to age and identity. To be clear, as there has been some confusion on this, all unaccompanied asylum-seeking children are looked after and should then receive the support that they need as looked-after children. While the issues of age and identity are complex, I am firmly of the view that they are better addressed for this particularly vulnerable group by strengthened responsibilities and by a wider regard to corporate parenting responsibilities in respect of UNCRC, and I hope members will agree. This is also why I support Martin Whitfield's amendments 19A and 19B, which cover similar ground. I also thank Willie Rennie for laying Amendment 109. Corporate parents are key to keeping the promise and ensuring that looked after children and young people get the best possible chances in life. Their role goes far beyond just adhering to statutory duties. They shape opportunities, nurture aspirations and help to create the foundations for children and young people to grow up loved, safe and respected. Requiring corporate parents to be explicit in corporate parenting plans about how they propose to exercise their responsibilities in a way which delivers on the promised recommendations will make it easier to track progress, identify gaps and ensure that the needs of all looked after children and young people can be met. I am therefore happy to support Amendment 109. I recognise the intent behind Martin Whitfield's Amendment 110, but it is neither necessary nor desirable. The Government's No One Left Behind approach has established an employability system delivered through local employability partnerships and supported by nationally consistent priorities and expectations. That approach already funds key workers to provide employability support that is tailored to the circumstances and needs of participants, including consideration of work, education or training. And that last point is important because Amendment 110 assumes that work is the best option for care-experienced young people when further or higher education or an apprenticeship or other training might be more in their interests. Care experienced people are a priority group for employability support. Since April 2019, almost 7,500 care experienced people have accessed support through No One Left Behind. This figure has increased since this amendment was last lodged at stage 2, with there being 381 new care experienced individuals within the last quarter accessing employability services. Amendment 110 would therefore result in unhelpful duplication of funding and provision that I believe is already working well. And I hope this reassures Martin Whitfield and he will not press his amendment. In summary, Presiding Officer, I encourage members to support my amendments 16, 17, 18, 19 and 20 and to support amendments 19A, 19B and 109. I would ask that members vote against Amendment 110 if pressed.
Thank you. And I call Willie Rennie to speak to Amendment 109 and other amendments in the group.
I'm grateful for the Minister's support of my Amendment 109, which was developed at the suggestion of Who Cares Scotland. And to reiterate, this means that corporate parenting plans would be required to include information on how corporate parenting responsibilities will be exercised in a way that delivers the recommendations of the promise. This is intended to increase accountability. Who Cares Scotland has set out the need for stronger accountability in primary legislation for keeping the promise, backed up by Audit Scotland report of 2025, which evidenced confusion 5 years on from the promise being made and the difficulty in distributing accountability. Together with my Amendment 204 in a later grouping, this will help ensure policy coherence across corporate parenting, children's services, planning and the promise. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call Martin Whitfield to speak to Amendment 19A and other amendments in the group.
I'm very grateful, Presiding Officer. Amendment 19A seeks specific consideration to be given to unaccompanied asylum seeker children in the guidance on corporate parenting that is to be produced under Amendment 19. And I thank the Minister for her very positive approach with regard to this, because unaccompanied asylum seeker children, I have to suggest, have been overlooked on too many occasions, and it is right that a clear corporate parent owes a duty of care to those individuals and that they fall under the cared for experience. And Amendment 19B would require that the guidance for corporate parents refers them to the guidance issued under Section 13(1) of the UNCRC Incorporation Scotland Act about the UNCRC requirements. Again, I believe this is an important protection that should be there, and I welcome the cooperation from the Government with regard to this amendment. And like my amendment in Group 1, it speaks to the importance of UNCRC in these matters, and I welcome the support for Amendment 109 in the name of Willie Rennie with regard to the fundamental role that corporate parenting will play in this situation and the understanding that needs to be had, and in particular the fact that it is the actions of the corporate parent in which we will most successfully see the fulfilling of the promise. With regard to Amendment 110, this built on discussions from at stage 2, where very powerful testimony was heard from Duncan Dunlop about the golden opportunity that this bill provided to create proper pathways to employment and training for our care experienced young people. Because it's these young people who, for a variety of reasons, cannot or do not access the networks and support that families would normally provide. And we should be bold in our ambition to support them, and we should be bold in arguing that our representatives from our care experienced communities here today are worthy of that support. They are worthy of the very same opportunities as everybody else has. I do recognise the concerns that we've heard recently from organisations like COSLA and Social Work Scotland. And we are not in an environment where policies like those proposed in Amendment 110 are currently feasible. There is an overlap with existing work, and I'm very grateful that the Minister was able to bring the current quarter figures to show the success that does exist there. But I would urge the Government, and I would seek confirmation from the Minister, that this will be continued to be built on, so that we can identify both the successes, but where there are challenges, they are easily and quickly picked up, and then through the corporate parenting responsibilities of UNCRC, they can be supported. And with that, I'll consider the position on whether I push that amendment. I'm grateful, Presiding Officer.
Thank you. And I call on the Minister to wind up.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Just to respond directly to Mr Whitfield's comments, I think this is absolutely something that will have to be followed up. As I've been clear, the provision is there just now and there are children and young people benefiting from it. But we absolutely have to make sure that where we're putting funding and where we are putting those efforts, that is making a tangible difference. I think one of the points that I made during my comments was around ensuring that it's the right route for children and young people. So employability is just one part of that. I think we need to look at the wider picture, ensuring that all the access routes and all the pathways for children and young people are progressing the way that we intended them to. So just to really reassure Mr Whitfield that I absolutely feel that further work is delivered, I don't necessarily believe that this amendment is the way forward for that.
Thank you. And the question is that Amendment 16 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. I call Amendment 17 in the name of the Minister, already debated with Amendment 16. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 17 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. I call Amendment 109 in the name of Willie Rennie, already debated with Amendment 16. Willie Rennie to move or not move?
Moved.
The question is that Amendment 109 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. I call Amendment 18 in the name of the Minister, already debated with Amendment 16. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 18 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? I call Amendment 19 in the name of the Minister, already debated with Amendment 16. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. I call Amendment 19A in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 16. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Move.
The question is that Amendment 19A be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. I call Amendment 19B in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 16. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Move.
The question is that Amendment 19B be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. Minister to press or withdraw Amendment 19 as amended. Thank you. The question is that Amendment 19 as amended be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. I call Amendment 110 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 16. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Not move.
The amendment is not moved. I call Amendment 20 in the name of the Minister, already debated with Amendment 16. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 20 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed, and we move to Group 6, Advocacy Services for Care-Experienced Persons. I call Amendment 21 in the name of the Minister, grouped with amendments as shown in the groupings. I point out that if Amendment 23 is agreed to, I cannot call Amendments 112, 113, 114 and 115 due to a preemption. I call the Minister to move Amendment 21 and speak to other amendments in the group.
Presiding Officer, the promise tells us of the importance of independent advocacy services and the role that they can play to support and uphold the rights of children currently in care and people with experience of care. That's why we put a lifelong right for people to access advocacy services into this bill. At stage 2, the Education, Children and Young People Committee agreed to a definition of independent advocacy introduced by Ross Greer that was directly taken from the Mental Health Care and Treatment Scotland Act 2003. I raised concerns about directly lifting a definition from other legislation that was designed for a specific purpose within a mental health context and which had the potential to exclude some advocacy providers from being considered independent. I have therefore laid a package of amendments which directly address those concerns and seek to provide a definition that is workable and desirable in terms of meeting the needs of children and adults with care experience. Amendment 29 inserts a new section setting out that local authorities and health boards cannot be regarded as providing independent care experience advocacy services. Members of these bodies are also not independent advocates in relation to care services provided by the body of which they are a member. It also sets out that those operating under contractual or other arrangements with a local authority or health board are not automatically treated as a service of the local authority or health board. This will mean that Bernardo's and similar providers could continue to provide independent advocacy where they deliver other support services under contractual arrangements with local authorities. But importantly, it prevents any overlap between individuals providing advocacy services and those providing or making decisions about the care services to which a care-experienced person's use of the advocacy service relates. And that is an important boundary to put in place. Amendments 21, 22 and 23 and Amendments 26, 27 and 86 are consequential to Amendment 29. I recognise that Nicola Sturgeon and Martin Whitfield, with their respective Amendments 114, 115 and 29A, are seeking to protect against conflicts of interest by ensuring that care providers do not also act as independent advocates in the same local authority area, and that is a legitimate concern. Amendments 114 and 115 would amend the Stage 2 definition of independence in Section 4.2a to add this exclusion criterion, but we are already inserting a comprehensive revised definition of independence at Stage 3 through Amendment 29. Amendment 29A simply adds the same exclusion criterion to that definition. Supporting Amendment 29A therefore achieves what Amendments 114 and 115 seek to achieve, but does so in a more comprehensive way. I have reflected very carefully on Amendment 29A. On balance, I consider it reflects a principled approach that protects against conflicts of interest. It ensures that organisations providing care services under contract with local authorities in an area are not regarded as providing independent advocacy for care-experienced people who are or who were placed in residential or secure care in that area. This creates a clear structural boundary preventing any overlap between those making decisions about care and those providing independent advocacy in those circumstances. I thank Nicola Sturgeon for laying Amendment 29A and allowing us to consider these important issues. However, I also recognise that Amendment 29A will affect third sector providers such as Bernardo's and Aberlour, which currently provide both independent advocacy and wider support services under contract with local authorities. If Amendment 29A is agreed, they would not currently be able to provide independent advocacy for care-experienced people in residential or secure care in areas where they provide contracted care services. However, Amendment 29A reflects a clear choice, which is to prioritise absolute clarity about the independence of advocacy services from care provision by creating structural separation. By ensuring that organisations do not provide both relevant care services and advocacy in the same area, we remove any possibility of perceived or actual conflicts of interest. On balance, that feels like the right thing to do, and I support Amendment 29A. My Amendment 25 seeks to protect choice. It states that giving a person a statutory right of access to care experience advocacy does not prevent them from choosing someone else to support and represent them, for example, a children's rights officer or a trusted adult, when they're accessing services or making their views known to decision makers. That also includes a child choosing a family or care worker or someone else employed in the provision of care services as their advocate, albeit they would not be an independent advocacy support worker. Amendment 25 therefore protects against care-experienced people feeling pressured into taking up advocacy support if it is not wanted or prevented from accessing support from a person of their choosing. Without choice, we lose the benefit and strength of relationships from the service, again something that care-experienced people tell us matters hugely to them. I hope I have reassured Martin Whitfield on these key points and that he will prefer my amendments to his own. Finally, I welcome Mr Balfour's amendment 24, 116 and 117, which bring refinements to amendments he lodged at Stage 2, and I encourage members to support them. I ask members to support amendments 21, 22, 23, 26, 27, 29, 29A and 86, and to reject amendments 111, 112, 113, 114 and 115 if pressed. I move Amendment 21.
Thank you. I call Martin Whitfield to speak to Amendment 111 and other amendments in the group.
I'm very grateful, Presiding Officer. And can I thank the Minister in opening for explaining the reasoning behind, in particular, her amendments 21 and 22 and the confirmation of the requirement for that separation so that independence is right. My amendment 111 sought to make allowances for the advocacy services which don't meet the strict definition of independence, and arrangements where, for example, contractors may work with local authorities in the provision of some services or provide other services alongside advocacy should not mean that the invaluable expertise of these organisations is lost to care-experienced children and young people. Amendment 112 is consequential to this amendment, and I think the Minister picked up and highlighted one of the organisations for whom this would apply. But notwithstanding, I believe that we should have a definition. Happy to give way to Mr Balfour.
Jeremy Balfour.
I apologise if the member is just coming on to this point, but within his amendment he has the words reasonably practical. I wonder, what does that mean? He will remember from his legal days that these definitions will be looked at by lawyers and courts in due course. Does that mean financial reasonability? I'm just wondering whether he can give a clearer definition, and does he think it's clear enough if this was to be passed?
Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful to Mr Balfour's amendment, and I would not attempt to stray into a far-forgotten land of lawyers and in defining reasonable and practicability. But it does, I think the member does rightly bring into this discussion one of the challenges that this bill, that indeed keeping the promise, that indeed when we talked about corporate parenting early, brings up about the definitions that are sitting within our legislation and the extent to which they will seek to achieve what it is we want to achieve. And in the section that we're talking about here is revolved around seeking to define independence and almost challenging to seek to define independence from what? In essence, it's independence from corporate parenting. And it is a challenge that will continue to push against the promise. And when we look around the United Kingdom and into other areas, the challenge of that independence, and what does independence mean if there is only a small pool of independent people to be chosen from? Because we need to go back to the principle about what the promise is about and who it is speaking to. It is speaking to our care-experienced young people. It is speaking to the life that they have. And the need for independence at that time, in certain circumstances, is sometimes very easy to see, but then very hard to enforce. And I think one of the challenges that we've had across this chamber, and indeed arose even before stage 2, is seeking that definition of independence. So I've got a long way around to avoid answering the member's question, but I will send him a very large invoice for my services in helping him to understand that. My Amendment 115 sought to provide a definition, but as we know, we've had several options before us on this point, and I look forward to hearing other members' contributions on that. And with that, Presiding Officer, I will sit.
Thank you. And I call Nicola Sturgeon to speak to Amendment 113 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. All of the Stage 3 amendments in my name, which are in this group and also in Groups 8 and 17, have been lodged in consultation with Who Cares Scotland. So before I turn to my amendments 113, 114 and 29A in this group, I want to take a very quick moment to pay tribute to Who Cares Scotland. You know, bluntly, without their campaigning passion, skill and perseverance, we wouldn't be here debating this bill today. It was the Who Cares 1000 Voices campaign that persuaded me to establish the Independent Care Review, and it was, of course, the Independent Care Review that led to the promise. Some of the young people who came to Bute House around a decade ago as small children to persuade me to try to make life better for those who spend some or all of their childhood in care are actually here with us in the gallery today. Back then, I had to crouch down to speak to them. Today, most of them tower over me. But I am so grateful to them and to everyone in the care experience community who certainly burrowed their way into my heart, and much more importantly, who have ensured that life will be better for those who come after them. I think they deserve the gratitude and the respect of all of us in this chamber. One of the massive achievements of Who Cares Scotland in the context of this bill has been securing the right to independent advocacy for care experienced people. And I believe that is important in its own right, but I believe it is more fundamental than that. I believe independent advocacy will become a catalyst to help young people realise their rights overall and to help us keep the promise. And that takes me to the amendments in this group in my name, which relate to the definition of independent advocacy. Amendment 113 removes language imported from the definition in mental health legislation that is not really appropriate in this context. Amendment 114 adds more specification to the definition. It stipulates that to be classed as independent as an advocate, in addition to not being a member of a local authority or health board in the same area as the advocacy services to be provided, they must also not provide care services under contract to a local authority in the same area. In simpler terms, a worker in a care home or a secure unit cannot be deemed to be an independent advocate for a child living in that care home or secure setting. Now, to be clear, and in response to those who say that this will unduly restrict the availability of good advocates, this does not remove choice from a young person opting to have the care home worker as their advocate if that is an arrangement that they are happy with and have confidence in. However, if they do not wish this, if perhaps the young person has issues or conflict within the care home or with their care provider more generally, it means that they will have the option of an advocate who is genuinely independent. I think that is essential to avoid conflicts of interest and give proper protection for the rights of young people. It also aligns with the definition of independence supported by the Scottish Independent Advocacy Alliance, which is advocacy that is structurally, financially and psychologically separate from services. Now, as the Minister has highlighted, Amendment 29A in my name achieves the same as Amendment 114, but it is an addition to the Minister's Amendment 29, which rewrites these provisions and, in my view, makes them better. I'm very grateful to the Minister for indicating her support for 29A, and in light of that, I will not move Amendments 113 and 114, but would urge the Chamber to support 29A.
Thank you. I call Jeremy Balfour to speak to Amendment 116 and other amendments in the group.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Advocacy plays a vital role in enabling people to express their views and make informed decisions. It supports children, young people and adults to navigate complex systems and have their voices heard. At Stage 2, I lodged an amendment to ensure that care experienced people are offered advocacy at the earliest appropriate opportunity. The committee agreed with the amendment, and I am grateful for members' support for constructive engagement with the Minister for Children and Young People and a promise since then. Today, thanks to the help of the Minister and her officials, I want to introduce Amendment 116. It preserves the Stage 2 intent, but it sets out further details to strengthen how this will work in practice. This requires regulations under Section 4.1 to specify how care experienced people will be made aware of the right to access advocacy. It also places a duty on the Scottish Ministers to have regard to the desirability of a person being able to exercise a right at the earliest appropriate opportunity. The principle of earliest appropriate access is important, but effective delivery depends on practical details. Who informs the care experienced individual, when and through which channels of their right to advocacy support. Putting awareness raises arrangements into regulations and placing a duty on Minister to consider the desirability of early exercise of a right. I recognise the diverse routes by which people enter, experience and leave care and seek to support a flexible framework that can adapt as practice evolves. Amendment 117 is consequential to that amendment. Care experienced children, young people and adults must know about their right to access advocacy support at the right time. Ensuring early information and clear routes to early advocacy support is key to securing the right support up front. I believe Amendments 116 and 117 build upon my amendment that was agreed at stage 2 and is an important step in our journey to keep the promise by the care community to right to have their voices heard. And I welcome the Minister's support and ask members to support. Amendment 24 was tabled at stage 2 of the bill and received support both from the Minister and many of the colleagues at the committee. By the vagueness of whip-controlled voting, the amendment was voted down by the committee, a mistake which needs to be rectified here at stage 3 in the chamber. There was a great deal of discussion at stage 2 about the pros and cons of opt-in versus opt-out of advocacy services. Indeed, even the third sector, who have been instrumental in helping us shape our views on this matter, have been split in their views. But it's my belief, and shared I think by the government, that advocacy services should be offered on an opt-in basis for children in the care experience, and I will briefly outline my reasons why children should always be made fully aware of their rights and options, but advocacy should never be forced upon them. If we go for an opt-out model, children might feel pressured to have to share their story with yet another individual, a stranger whom they do not know and have no connection with. I've heard repeatedly in meetings with charities who work in this sector that children do not like having to tell their story multiple times, as this can cause upset, confusion and fatigue. It should therefore be a choice for a child to decide if they wish to use the services of an independent advocate, but this should never be against their wishes. Advocacy helps people to express their views and make informed decisions. Advocates help children and their families navigate the complex landscape and support them to make their own choices. To force advocacy on a person goes against what advocacy sets out to achieve, and it will be viewed with suspicion and not entered into fully or willingly. By making advocacy opt-out, it changes the power dynamic, taking the power and choice away from the child, and many children might feel unable or uncomfortable saying no to the advocacy offered. Another reason for opt-in being the preferred model of service delivery is that it can create a forced demand on the service of advocates. Aberdure, our national organisation, which have been supporting fostering families since 2004, says that insisting on advocacy will add more professionals to a cluttered landscape. Sometimes that will be detrimental and in fact have negative effects rather than positive. I'm grateful again to the Minister for her meetings and for helping me with this, and I do ask members to support my amendment. Thank you, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, and I call Willie Rennie.
I'm going to speak against 4 amendments, 113, 114 and 115, but in particular 29A, which I know the Minister is now supporting. These amendments would add to the definition of independent advocacy for care-experienced people and would limit the number of organisations which could provide independent advocacy, ruling out charities, including Barnardo's, in many circumstances. While I recognise the intent behind these amendments is to ensure that advocacy services are adequately independent, I believe that we should listen carefully to the organisations which have raised concerns. Members will have noted the briefing from Children First, which says, "We are concerned that these amendments would prevent high-quality advocacy services already working in line with the promise and the National Advocacy Framework from continuing. In our view, this bill should increase advocacy support options, not reduce them. However, Amendments 114, 115 and 29A would remove advocacy support options for children and young people by restricting who can provide these services. Organisations that deliver both residential support and advocacy can do so with independence and integrity, and we are not aware of any evidence suggesting otherwise, these amendments could have immediate and long-term consequences, reducing the flexibility of local areas to fund services that suit their needs best. That's Children First. But Barnardo's has also raised concerns. They've said, "We are concerned that the effect of these amendments could have both immediate and long-term consequences, leading to significant disruption, increased confusion and added complexity to the commissioning and provision of advocacy support for children and young people. We believe these amendments could reduce flexibility and choice available to commissioners of independent advocacy and children's care services, and would directly lead to the disruption to the structure and delivery of the National Advocacy Service for the Children's Hearing System, which has benefited from the creation of a strong network of advocacy providers focused on the delivery of high-quality, independent advocacy since 2020. I think we all want the bill to work in practice, especially now that we have reached stage 3. I am worried, however, that introducing this change now, we would be at risk of seriously disrupting good work that is being done now and restricting the choice that will be available in setting up the new advocacy service. Now, I know I'm in conflict with Nicola Sturgeon on this, and I recognise the work that she has done in this area, but I would urge her not to press 29A and to follow the advice of the Children's First and Barnardo's, who have got tremendous record in this area and a good reputation. We do not want to disrupt which is already in place. We should therefore reject Amendments 29A, 113, 114 and 115.
Thank you, and I call on the Minister to wind up.
Presiding Officer, the time that we've spent debating this issue, I think, demonstrates this, both today and at stage 2, I think demonstrates its importance. The provision of a right to lifelong advocacy services for children and people with care experience is entirely new and a real signal of progression towards keeping the promise in this bill. Now, there has been a lot of discussion on the balance that is required for this question of independence. My focus for stage 3 has been on ensuring that that potential conflict of interest is avoided. However, I absolutely recognise the challenges that Mr Rennie has brought before us today. I made many of the same points in my comments at stage 2. The amendments I have brought forward provide a regulation-making power for ministers to specify additional independence criteria for the purpose of Section 4.1. This power is subject to a consultation requirement and the affirmative procedure, ensuring appropriate parliamentary scrutiny and input from the care community and stakeholders if it is used. So some of the challenges that Mr Rennie presents could be considered, scrutinised and looked at again in a new Parliament. I think today's debate really demonstrates that, as a Parliament, we... Yes.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful for the Minister to take an intervention. I think, building on the request that Willie Rennie has put forward and listening to the language of the Minister, is this not something that very specifically those regulations could look at, rather than something that may or may not be considered? Now, how that would be triggered is obviously open to both parliamentary procedures and other procedures. But does the Minister envisage that actually through those regulations, literally at the first sign of any challenges coming forward, there would be a way of adding to the list that would allow this to be resolved?
Minister.
I think it's something that has to be addressed now for all of the, or a whole range of different issues in this bill. There have been conflicting opinions from a range of different organisations, and I will be the first to admit that it has been hard to navigate that and to ensure that you are doing the right thing. I believe that the approach that I'm taking at this point, having summed up the evidence and the discussions and the consideration given at stage 2 and throughout the stage 3 process, I believe that taking these further safeguards for children and young people is the appropriate way to respond.
Can I have Willie Rennie's microphone. Thank you.
We know that we're finding it difficult to deliver the promise on time. We know that the interim reports have showed that we're behind. This is one of the areas that actually in independent advocacy progress has been made. What I don't understand is why we're restricting it further and potentially undermining bits of the promise that actually maybe are making a bit of progress. So I would urge the Minister to reconsider her support. We don't have an opportunity to revise this. We're at the end of the process of legislation. So to introduce this at such a late stage, in such a fashion, I think is a retrograde step. And I would urge the Minister to reconsider her support for 29A.
Minister.
I have considered this very, very carefully. I don't believe that this is going to undermine efforts that have already been made or delivered in the promise. In actual fact, I think this will help to bolster the support and the right support for children and young people by ensuring that there is absolutely no potential or possibilities of conflict of interest. But again, Mr Rennie refers to the delivery of the promise, and we do have provisions in the bill and things that we're about to debate in relation to reviews. I think this is absolutely something that if, some of the unintended consequences that Mr Rennie refers to, if that is something that is being considered, we can use the powers that we have through those regulations to address that. Oh, sorry, I will take Mr Greer's intervention.
I'm grateful to the Minister for taking the intervention. I just wonder if, on the point that Willie Rennie has raised on behalf of organisations who do provide a lot of excellent service in this area about immediate disruption, could the Minister just provide some reassurance that the Government's intention would be, whether it's through how we commence the provisions of this bill or in the steps that are taken in the immediate aftermath of that, that we will ensure in that transition period there's not going to be a scenario where any individual young person has an advocacy service that's currently working well for them taken away. What we're looking at here is a transition towards a model of the most effective kind of independent advocacy, not a sudden switch from one system to another that would see some people's advocacy disrupted.
Minister.
That would absolutely be my intention, and I think also the amendments that were put forward in relation to choice for young people also speak to that. But of course, it's not a case that we would want to see something ending abruptly where young people are being supported. I would expect that to continue, moving to that new system in a transitional basis. I believe Ms Sturgeon wants an intervention.
Nicola Sturgeon.
Can I thank the Minister for taking the intervention? Can I say I do have sympathy with the point raised by Willie Rennie, and I have great respect for the work done by organisations like Bernardo's. I think it is important that we establish a clear principle in this bill that conflicts of interest are an issue, and they are an issue that has been raised with me several times over the years by care experienced young people in residential care homes and in secure settings, and that is what I am trying to address. However, I do welcome the Minister, and address this point to the Minister's comment in her last contribution about consideration of transition. I think that is important because nobody, and I would be the last person who would want to see immediate disruption. But can I also, in my last point, would be to underline the point the Minister has made, and perhaps ask her to underline it again, is the point, thanks to one of her amendments, around choice. This is not about imposing something on young people. Young people will continue to have the choice of an advocate that they wish, but it does recognise that to be genuinely independent, there can't be these conflicts of interest. And I recognise the concerns that are being raised, but I do think with patience and sense, these practical challenges of implementation can be worked through without compromising the principle at stake.
Minister.
I think that sums it up perfectly. I've been very clear the decision that I've taken around where to lend my support is with children and young people's best interests at heart. And as I've been very clear, that element of choice is extremely important and will remain. With that, I will draw my remarks to a close. I think members' amendments have allowed us to debate these issues fully. I would ask Martin Whitfield not to press his amendments and instead support mine and Jeremy Balfour's and Nicola Sturgeon's 29A.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 21 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is not agreed. There will be a division and members should cast their votes now. The vote is closed. I call Kenneth Gibson for a point of order.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. I couldn't connect. I would have voted yes.
Thank you, Mr Gibson. We'll ensure that is recorded. I call Shona Robison for a point of order.
I would have voted yes.
Thank you, Ms Robison. I call Mark Ruskell for a point of order.
Would have voted yes.
Thank you, Mr Ruskell. And I call Jim Fairley for a point of order.
I'd have voted yes, Presiding Officer.
Thank you, Mr Fairley. The result of the vote on amendment number 21 in the name of the Minister is yes 94, no 1. There were 15 abstentions. The amendment is therefore agreed. I call amendment 22 in the name of the Minister, already debated with amendment 21. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that amendment 22 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is not agreed. There will be a division and members should cast their votes now. The vote is closed. The result of the vote on amendment number 22 in the name of the Minister is yes 92, no 1. There were 16 abstentions. The amendment is therefore agreed. I call amendment 111 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with amendment 21. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Move.
The question is that amendment 111 be agreed to. Are we all agreed?
No.
The Parliament is not agreed. There will be a division and members should cast their votes now. The vote is closed. The result of the vote on amendment number 111 in the name of Martin Whitfield is yes 16, no 94. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore not agreed. I call amendment 23 in the name of the Minister, already debated with amendment 21, and I remind members that if amendment 23 is agreed to, I cannot call amendments 112, 113, 114 and 115 due to a pre-emption. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that amendment 23 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. Therefore, I will not call the amendments. And we will move to the next question. I call amendment 116 in the name of Jeremy Balfour, already debated with amendment 21. Jeremy Balfour to move or not move?
Move.
Thank you. The question is that amendment 116 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? We are agreed. I call Amendment 24 in the name of Jeremy Balfour, already debated with Amendment 21. Jeremy Balfour, to move or not move?
Move.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 24 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. I call Amendment 117 in the name of Jeremy Balfour, already debated with Amendment 21. Jeremy Balfour, to move or not move?
Move.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 117 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. I call Amendments 25, 26 and 27, all in the name of the Minister, and all previously debated with Amendment 21. I invite the Minister to move Amendments 25 to 27 en bloc.
Moved.
Thank you. Does any member object to a single question being put on Amendments 25 to 27? No member objects. Therefore, the question is that Amendments 25 to 27 are agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. We are agreed. We move to Group 7, Structure of Act. I call Amendment 28 in the name of the Minister, grouped with amendments as shown in the groupings. Minister, to move Amendment 28 and speak to other amendments in the group.
Presiding Officer, all amendments in this group are technical in nature and do not change the policy intent of any of the Bill's provisions. Amendment 28, 30, 31 and 34 reorder the sections of the Bill so that the freestanding sections of the Bill, including a local interpretation section, are together in Chapter 1 of Part 1 of the Bill. Amendment 32 makes clear that Section 7 is a local interpretation section for the purposes of Chapter 1 in which it is placed. The definitions in that section will apply only in respect of the provisions in that chapter. Amendment 89 creates an interpretation section that is applicable to the whole Act, making clear that the definition of child applies to the whole Act. Amendments 42 and 87 ensure that all the regulation-making powers sit together under Section 24, with Amendment 43 being consequential on Amendment 42. Amendment 90 ensures that where a provision in the Act refers to a day on which a section comes into force, ministers may specify the date specifically. All the amendments seek to maximise accessibility and enhance clarity and coherence across the bill as a whole. I move Amendment 28 in my name.
Thank you, Minister. I see that no member has pressed. Therefore, I would ask the Minister if she has anything to add by way of wind-up.
Nothing further to add.
Nothing further to add. The question is, therefore, that Amendment 28 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I now call Amendment 29 in the name of the Minister, ready to debate with Amendment 21. Minister, to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. I now call Amendment 29A in the name of Nicola Sturgeon, already debated with Amendment 21. Nicola Sturgeon, to move or not move?
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 29A be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is not agreed. There will be a division and members should cast their vote now. The vote is now closed. Point of order, Shona Robertson.
I couldn't connect. I would have voted yes.
Thank you, Ms Robertson. Your vote will be recorded. Thank you. The result of the vote on amendment number 29A in the name of Nicola Sturgeon is yes, 103, no, 4. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore agreed. I now call on the Minister to press or withdraw Amendment 29 as amended.
Pressed.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 29 as amended be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed, and therefore Amendment 29 as amended is agreed to. We now turn to Group 8 on guidance in relation to care experience. I call Amendment 118 in the name of Nicola Sturgeon, grouped with amendments as shown in the groupings. And I call on Nicola Sturgeon to move Amendment 118 and to speak to other members of the group.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. My amendments in this group relate to Section 5 and Section 6 and the duty on ministers to issue guidance to public authorities about care experienced people and their lived realities, and the duty on public authorities to have due regard to such guidance. These amendments replace references to guidance with regulations throughout these sections. Now, I know, and let me be candid about this at the outset, that this might seem a bit esoteric, but actually it goes to the heart of one of the biggest issues that I have heard time and again over the years from care experienced people. And that is a lack of trust on the part of care experienced young people about public authorities always doing what they are supposed to do. Now, we can argue about whether that criticism is justified or not, but it is very real in the minds of many care experienced people, past and present, across the country. Issues of variation, postcode lotteries of care, concerns that what is meant to happen in theory does not always translate into practice. These are perennial problems and concerns, and they operate to undermine trust and confidence, and they do have, on occasion, a real impact on the day-to-day experience of care experienced people. Concerns that have been raised, and I'm sure will be raised during this debate about these amendments, I want to take a moment to address. Firstly, that regulations take longer to prepare, conclude and issue than guidance does. I recognise that, although I would say from some experience in government that there is no hard and fast reason why regulations cannot be passed at pace. But I also would say that with parliamentary engagement, what emerges from that process will be stronger and more likely to stand the test of time. And that takes me to the other concern that I would anticipate being expressed, that regulations are more difficult to change in future than guidance is. But if Parliament gets them right in the first place, if they command confidence, they will not need to be regularly changed. And I think the challenge is to get these regulations right so that they do have the confidence of the care experienced community. Crucially, however, they will be binding as regulations and not optional. They will have to be complied with consistently and in all parts of Scotland. And I think that is important. I think it is important in terms of building trust and in building confidence and in ensuring that we don't have the kinds of variations in care that we have seen all too often. And I think this will, however esoteric it might seem, I think this will help us with the overall delivery of the promise and help build confidence in that delivery as we go on. I'll take an intervention.
Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful to Nicola Sturgeon for taking the intervention. And indeed, when we look at other areas where guidance is being relied on, we have seen the postcode lottery that she has in fact spoken about. Whereas with regulation, the interpretation, to go back to an earlier intervention from Jeremy Balfour, is far more better understood and followed by everyone.
Nicola Sturgeon.
I think Martin Whitfield puts it perfectly, and actually that sums up the reasons for these amendments. Regulations are binding in a way that guidance, even guidance with a due regard provision in legislation, is simply not. And I think one of the important objectives in the delivery of the promise is to make sure that it is delivered right across Scotland in a consistent way, because only if that happens will it have the confidence of the care experienced community. So with those remarks, Presiding Officer, I move Amendment 118.
Thank you, Ms Sturgeon. I call Ros McCall to speak to Amendment 121 and other amendments of the group. Ms McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Presiding Officer, my Amendment 121 builds on the amendment that I lodged at stage 2 that was agreed by the committee. This allows for the care experience guidance to promote best practice for public authorities in respecting the rights for those with care experience. and to take a trauma-informed approach when delivering these services. And I consider this to strengthen the position that was agreed at Stage 2. The guidance will be key to shaping day-to-day practice and ensuring a shared, consistent understanding of care experience across services, and to settle a national and consistent direction for the language used in and around the care system. It is therefore essential that the rights of those with care experience are respected, and that the guidance allows for interactions to take into account the effects of any trauma experienced and seeks to avoid further trauma or reoccurrence of past trauma. And I would urge members to support this amendment in this group, and we are supportive of all the amendments in this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms McCall. I call Willie Rennie.
This isn't getting personal, but I'm going to object to Nicola Sturgeon's amendments in this group as well. She's already anticipated my objections, but I still want to reiterate my concerns. They relate to this. Our amendments relate to defining care experience and regulations instead of guidance. I understand that these have been lodged with the intention of strengthening this definition, making it more binding on public authorities and better influencing future policy. I understand that. However, I'm concerned that in practice these amendments could have the opposite effect. Regulations would still require guidance to be issued, and given the complexities of the legal definition of care experience, there would be a risk of splitting different aspects between regulation and guidance. This could leave a definition which is less clear, not more. It also appears that including the definition in regulation rather than guidance would not bind public authorities any more than sticking with guidance. Therefore, it's not clear what real benefit these amendments would bring, and they have to be weighed against the potential for delays to implementation. Yes, we'll take an intervention.
I've got great respect for Willie Rennie on these issues. I wonder if he would recognise that there was actually a considerable degree of disappointment within the care experience community that the definition of care experience did not appear on the face of the bill, and therefore regulations for some is a compromise in itself, but it is better than guidance. And can I also just ask him to reflect, and I say this from experience in government, that there is a difference between guidance, even with a due regard duty, and regulations in the way that public authorities perceive that they require to abide by them.
Willie Rennie.
I fully understand the perception in this area and the disappointment within the sector, but we've got a responsibility in this place to actually implement law that is the most effective and will actually help the care experience people in the way that they would like to be assisted. So I think we need to understand ourselves that actually bringing in this measure could make it more complicated, could create that division and could create greater complexity as a result. And that's why I've got great caution about doing it this way. Of course, it would be far better if it was on the face of the bill. Of course, it would be. But what we need to do now, because we don't have that, is to make sure that we have the most effective way of implementing what the care experience community are desperately looking for.
Thank you, Mr Rennie. I now call the Minister.
Presiding Officer, Amendments 118 to 120 and Amendments 122 through to 133 seek to update Sections 5 and 6 to require Scottish Ministers to lay regulations in relation to care experience instead of statutory guidance. I thank Nicola Sturgeon for setting out the rationale behind these amendments, and I understand the strength of feeling that placing requirements and regulations will provide a greater degree of compliance and consistency in public authorities adhering to those requirements. I agree in relation to the difference in perception between regulations and guidance. I'd also, I understand many of the concerns that Mr Rennie has raised. I think in terms of the point around confusion and complexity, I think that will be up to government to ensure that it is as clear and coherent as possible. I'll therefore support Amendments 118 to 120 and 122 to 133. I would ask members to vote in favour of them. There's one other amendment in this group in the name of Rose McCall. I also support this amendment and encourage members to vote for it.
Thank you, Minister. And I call on Nicola Sturgeon to wind up and to press or withdraw Amendment 118.
I will be brief in summing up. I recognise Willie Rennie's concerns, but I don't think these issues, certainly the concerns around inconsistency, are insurmountable. I think the Minister is absolutely right. That is incumbent on Government and Parliament to make sure those inconsistencies don't occur. But by putting this in regulations, I think it gives it a power and import that guidance doesn't have, and I think that goes some way to allaying the concerns that many in the care experience community have. The guidance often results in that postcode lottery of approach, and that is what, through the promise, we're trying to get away from. So I thank the Minister for her support and would ask the Chamber to support these amendments, and I will press 118.
Thank you, Ms Sturgeon. The question is that Amendment 118 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is agreed. Amendment 118 is therefore agreed to. I call Amendment 119 in the name of Nicola Sturgeon, already debated with Amendment 118. Nicola Sturgeon to move or not move?
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 119 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 120 in the name of Nicola Sturgeon, already debated with Amendment 118. Nicola Sturgeon to move or not move?
Moved.
Moved. The question is that Amendment 120 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 121 in the name of Ros McCall, already debated with Amendment 118. Ros McCall to move or not move?
Moved.
Moved. The question is that Amendment 121 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendments 122, 123, 124, 125 and 126, all in the name of Nicola Sturgeon, and all previously debated with Amendment 118. I invite Nicola Sturgeon to move Amendments 122 to 126 en bloc.
Moved.
Thank you. Does any member object to a single question being put on Amendments 122 to 126? That is, no member objects, or no? No member objects. That's good. So the question is that Amendments 122 to 126 are agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 30 in the name of the Minister, already debated with Amendment 28. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 30 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendments 127, 128, 129, 130, 131, 132 and 133, all in the name of Nicola Sturgeon and all previously debated with Amendment 118. I invite Nicola Sturgeon to move Amendments 127 to 127 to 133 en bloc.
Moved.
Thank you. Does any member object to a single question being put on Amendments 127 to 133? No member objects. The question is that Amendments 127 to 133 are agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 31 in the name of the Minister, already debated with Amendment 28. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 31 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. We now turn to Group 9 on permanence. I call Amendment 134 in the name of Fulton McGregor, grouped with Amendment 135, and I call on Fulton McGregor to move Amendment 134 and speak to both amendments in the group. Mr McGregor.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Amendments in Group 9 relate to permanence for children who are or have been looked after by a local authority. I just want to say at the outset that this is a probing amendment. I do not intend to press it to a vote this afternoon or this evening. Instead, I'm inclined to support Martin Whitfield's amendment in the same group, and I'd like to thank the Minister and Mr Whitfield for their engagement in this area. At its core, permanence is about one simple but fundamental principle, that every child has the right to grow up in a safe, stable and loving home without unnecessary delay. Permanence cannot solely be considered a technical or procedural matter. It must be regarded as central to a child's well-being, their development and their sense of security and belonging. When it's not possible for a child to stay with their birth family, permanence can be achieved through kinship care, foster care or adoption. But whichever route is taken, what matters most is that decisions are made in a timely way and that children are not left in prolonged uncertainty. Research compiled by the NSPCC, who have helped table this motion with me, have consistently shown that children wait far too long for decisions about their permanent home. On average, it can take over 2 years for a permanence recommendation to be made, and many children then wait many months, and in some cases years, before they are living in a stable, permanent placement. That level of delay would be unacceptable in any context, but it's particularly harmful for babies and very young children. The first few months and years of life are critical for attachment and development, and during that time children are especially dependent on consistent, secure caregiving relationships. Instability, uncertainty or repeated moves can have profound and long-lasting impacts. And we all know that the delay affects outcomes. The longer a child remains in the system without permanence, the greater risk to their well-being, their relationships and their future stability. In the context of adoption, international evidence shows clearly that factors such as age at placement, early adversity and the number of moves all have a direct bearing on the likelihood of adoption breakdown at a later stage. Despite a range of policy initiatives, guidance and improvement programmes over many years which are welcome, this issue of delay remains persistent, and it's remained persistent for a long time. That should give us all pause for thought. It suggests that the current approach may not be sufficient and that further, more focused consideration is required. And that is the purpose of my Amendment 134. It would require Scottish Ministers to undertake a comprehensive, time-bound review of permanence in Scotland. It would ensure that Ministers consider the substantial body of Scottish research, examine other practice from across the world and assess whether different approaches, such as the use of statutory timescales, might help to reduce delay and improve outcomes. Importantly, the amendment would also ensure that the review is informed by those with lived experience, as well as by practitioners, local authorities and organisations working across adoption, fostering and kinship care. I do welcome the indication from the Minister, the very strong indication from the Minister at stage 2 and the discussions that I've had with her that a review of permanence is intended early in the next parliamentary session. So my purpose in lodging and speaking to this amendment today is to seek that reassurance that the proposed review will be comprehensive in scope, that will be undertaken within a clear and timely framework, and that will lead to meaningful and measurable change for children. And in particular, and finally, Presiding Officer, I would be grateful if the Minister could set out how the Government intends to ensure that babies and very young children, who are often the most affected by delay, are properly considered in this work, and how progress will be monitored and reported to Parliament. On that basis, I move Amendment 134. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr McGregor. I now call Martin Whitfield to speak to Amendment 135 and the other amendment in the group. Mr Whitfield. I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer. And in this group, the Chamber has a fine choice, which all flow from the very important work and challenges of permanence. And can I thank Fulton McGregor both for this report and for the work that we did at stage 2 at finding a consensus on the importance of this matter. And I would refer to his contribution that so finely articulated the real need to look at permanence for the stability, the love and the need to create a seeded connection from as early as possible and as swiftly as possible for children and in particular babies that go into care. The drift and delay that children, particularly young children and babies, in reaching permanent setting through the children's hearing system is hugely important. For far too many children in Scotland, the time taken to reach a permanent setting is too long. It's been outlined extensively in work such as the PACE research commented on and also the Best Services trial. This can be particularly damaging for children in their early stages, as has already been articulated. Like Fulton McGregor's amendment, references using evidence from the rest of the UK in any review is very important because any further work on permanence must account for this. There is significantly less delay in the time taken for permanence decisions in England and Wales to be reached than occurs here. And we need to try and learn why and how we can improve that system. And I welcome the Minister's engagement at stage 2 and beyond with regard to this very important matter. I also note the member's intention to withdraw his amendment, which I would have supported. And so we have a situation where, as I say, there is a relative choice, but I hope that the government can indicate its position on this. And we can see, as is contained within my amendment, that no later than 2 years after the section coming into force, this most important review being undertaken. And I will leave it there. Thank you, Mr Whitfield. I call Jeremy Balfour.
Presiding Officer, I've withdrawn my request to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Balfour. I call the Minister.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And I thank Fulton McGregor and Martin Whitfield for these amendments and for their continued focus on improving permanence outcomes for children. While I recognise and empathise with the purpose behind Fulton McGregor's Amendment 134, I don't consider that legislating for this is the right approach at this time. The amendment places a very detailed and prescriptive statutory duty on ministers and creates a statutory definition of permanence without there having been the opportunity to co-design and develop these with partners, stakeholders and especially children and families. The proposed definition also does not align with the current policy and practice on permanence, and that in itself would create challenges in terms of implementation. However, I understand, as I say, and am sympathetic to the concerns that have been raised by Fulton McGregor, and I hope that what I'm about to set out will go some way to ensuring that this is a government priority and a priority through the work delivering on the promise. On Amendment 135, I recognise Parliament's strong interest in improving understanding of how delays in permanence decision-making affect children, particularly younger children and infants. This amendment provides a more focused way to support that aim by requiring a review of the impact of delay to be carried out within 2 years of the section coming into force. Ministers will then require to publish the findings of that review, strengthening transparency in an area where members and stakeholders have highlighted the need for much clearer evidence. As I set out at stage 2, and to reassure Mr McGregor, it would be this government's intention to consult urgently and gather evidence early in the next Parliament to build a whole system picture of where delay arises and why. This Martin Whitfield's amendment will align directly with that work and will allow us to understand in particular the impact that delays on permanence decisions have on children. The amendment will ensure that future approaches to tackling drift and delay are shaped by the right evidence, informed by learning from other nations, including the rest of the UK, and developed collaboratively with partners. The statutory review introduced by Amendment 205 will give Parliament a clear update on the implementation of the Act within 2 years of royal assent. The findings from Amendment 135 can help inform that reporting, ensuring Parliament receives both the focused analysis on the impact of delay and the broader picture emerging from consultation. So I am satisfied that the work required by Amendment 135 can be factored directly into that wider programme, complementing the co-designed approach that stakeholders expect us to take. And just on Mr McGregor's point around the rights or support for babies and young children, Mr McGregor will be aware that there is a dedicated work stream for infants and babies in the Children's Hearing System Working Group. So not only are we looking to the consultation and the work that I've set out today, but there are other work streams ongoing to ensure and improve support for our youngest children. For these reasons, I will oppose Amendment 134 and support Amendment 135, and I encourage members to do likewise.
Thank you, Minister. And I call on Fulton McGregor to wind up and to press or withdraw Amendment 134.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. Just to be brief, I accept the Minister's views as set out there, and I also strongly welcome her commitment and focus and energy to this area, and certainly I think that there is something very much to take forward in this area for whoever returns in the next Parliament, and I want to thank her for that. And on that basis, Presiding Officer, I would like to seek the Parliament's permission to withdraw my Amendment 134 and would ask members to support Martin Whitfield's 135. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr McGregor. Mr McGregor seeks to withdraw Amendment number 134. Does any member object? No member objects. Amendment 134 is therefore withdrawn. I call Amendment 135 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 134. Martin Whitfield, to move or not move?
Move.
Move. The question is that Amendment 135 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendments 32, 33 and 34, all in the name of the Minister and all previously debated. I invite the Minister to move Amendments 32 to 34 en bloc.
Moved.
Thank you. Does any member object to a single question being put on Amendments 32 to 34? No member objects. The question is therefore that Amendments 32 to 34 are agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. We now turn to Group 10 on Children's Residential Care Services Profit Limitation. I call Amendment 35 in the name of the Minister, grouped with amendments as shown in the groupings. And I call on the Minister to move Amendment 35 and to speak to other amendments of the group. Minister.
Presiding Officer, Amendment 35 5 improves the effectiveness of the financial transparency measures in Section 8 of the Bill. It ensures that the Scottish Government is able to obtain a fuller picture of residential service providers' finances, including from parent... Oh, I will take an intervention at this.
Intervention from Ariane Burgess.
Apologies, that was an accident.
Okay. Minister.
I was wondering a little bit there. What have I said? It ensures that the Scottish Government is able to obtain a fuller picture of residential service providers' finances, including from parent or subsidiary undertakings, where this is relevant to the assessment of a service provider's profit levels, for the purposes of considering whether to impose a profit limitation requirement in accordance with the criteria set out in the bill. Amendments 37... Apologies, Presiding Officer, I should correct myself. I said Amendment 35 at the beginning. I meant to say Amendment 36 because I'm about to get on to Amendment 35. Amendments 37 to 41 are consequential to Amendment 36. Amendment 35 is a technical adjustment to the placement of the new sections of the Public Service Reform Scotland Act 2010 being inserted by Section 8 of the Bill. I hope the Chamber will join me in supporting my amendments. I thank Mr Rennie for his amendments 136, 137, 139 and 142, which exempt charities from the profit limitation requirements, but not from the financial transparency provisions in the bill. Mr Rennie's Amendment 2 was an alternative approach to this point. Having discussed with Mr Rennie, I believe that his amendments 136, 137, 139 and 142 will more effectively meet his aims. Among other things, they would cover charities registered in other parts of the UK rather than only Scottish charities. I believe these amendments strike an appropriate balance for charities and the wider children's residential care sector. I therefore support amendments 136, 137, 139 and 142 in the name of Willie Rennie and would ask him not to press his Amendment 2. I also thank Mr Rennie for raising the point about ensuring that the well-being of looked-after children is the priority in decision-making. His Amendment 3 covers the same ground as Amendment 141, but I believe that the latter is stronger in promoting the safeguarding and well-being of children and young people. Therefore, I will be supporting Amendment 141 and would ask him not to press Amendment 3. Section 8 was amended by Martin Whitfield at Stage 2 to ensure that other types of service providers could be included in financial transparency and profit limitation measures. I thank Mr Whitfield for his amendments 138, 140 and 143, which update the wording of those provisions, and I support these amendments. I move Amendment 35 in my name. In summary, Presiding Officer, I encourage members to support all amendments in this group other than Amendments 2 and 3, where Mr Rennie's alternative amendments are to be preferred. I would again like to thank my colleagues for their willingness to work together on these issues.
Thank you, Minister. I call Willie Rennie to speak to Amendment 136 and other amendments of the group. Mr Rennie.
Members will notice that I've got two sets of amendments in this group. Amendments 2, 3 and 141 were drafted at the suggestion of 2 and 3 at the suggestion of Aberlour, with the intention, firstly, of exempting charities from profit limitation requirements where they can demonstrate that any surplus is being used to be reinvested back into the delivery of children's services, and secondly, to create a statutory duty that decisions around profit limitation must be made with the well-being of children and young people as the primary consideration. However, I am grateful to the Government for working with me to bring forward alternatives to these amendments which achieve these aims in a more effective way. Amendments 136 and 137 will ensure that charities are exempt from the profit limitation requirement provisions in the bill. This exemption is appropriate and proportionate, since charities already legally bound and required to ensure that any surpluses they generate are used for charitable purposes. As already defined in Section 9 of the bill, this will include service providers in Scotland who are registered as charities in other parts of the UK. Amendments 139 and 142 are consequential and ensure that the rest of the provisions continue to operate as they should, given that charities will still be subject to information requirements under the bill. And of course, the Amendment 141, I'm grateful to the Minister for assisting on that front. I thank the Minister for her confirmation and would ask other members to also support these amendments, which will ensure that charities are not subject to unnecessary burdens, while also enabling the Bill's provisions on information gathering to operate as intended. And I confirm I will not be pressing Amendments 2 and 3, which sought to achieve the same effect as these amendments.
Thank you, Mr Rennie. I call Martin Whitfield to speak to Amendment 138 and other amendments of the group. Mr Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer. The amendments 138, 140 and 143 provide scope for the Scottish Ministers to add other persons to the list of entries subject to a profit limitation requirement, and I would like to thank the Minister and Government officials for their cooperation and assistance in developing these amendments that build, as the Minister has said, on Stage 2 amendments. Given the dynamic and evolving nature of the care sector, it is important that this bill provides flexibility to ensure that profit limitation requirements set out in Section 8 are effective. Profiting on the backs of children in care has no place in Scotland, and we must ensure that we can address new challenges that will be thrown up to both this Parliament and the Government going forward in order to fulfil the promise. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr Whitfield. And I call Ros McCall.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Whilst totally accept that profit in residential care should play no part, we have some concerns with this group of amendments that actually we need to make sure that there is no reduction of provision in Scotland. There is a real concern that looking into parent organisations could have the unintended consequences of within the sector and a reduction in the provision we have in Scotland. And to that end, we are not supportive of Amendments 36, 37, 140 and 41 in this group. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr McCall. I call on the Minister to wind up.
I'll just respond to Ms McCall's points briefly, because I think that is something that we have actively considered as a challenge in relation to this. I think the approach that the Government has taken has been a gradual, incremental approach to try to ensure that doesn't happen, but really just to try to provide some assurance that that has been a key consideration going forward. I will take the intervention from Mr Briggs.
I thank the Minister for taking intervention. I think the evidence we were taking at committee really demonstrated some of the concerns with the Welsh model, which the Scottish Government, although they've not directly taken that forward, can present a loss of capacity if we're not careful. I think that's the last thing any of us want to see. And I just wondered, in terms of what safeguards then ministers will make sure are in place, if this, as part of the bill, sees organisations moving away from Scotland, who will then pick up that additional capacity?
Well, I think Mr Briggs has made the point himself. You know, we've seen the challenges that are faced by the Welsh model. The Scottish Government did take a different approach to that because of those challenges, and to try to ensure that we did not see a mass exit from the market. But this is, of course, something that will be monitored going forward to ensure that there is that balance is there, and that we are not seeing a mass reduction in providers to, you know, ensure that children and young people are supported as they should be. So with that, I will make no further comments, Presiding Officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. The question is that Amendment 35 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 36 in the name of the Minister. Ready to debate with Amendment 35. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 36 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? We are not agreed. There will be a division, and members should cast their vote now. Point of order, Jamie Hepburn.
I would have voted yes.
I was just actually hoping that all the members were back. What has happened is that vote that has just taken place should have been 1 minute, but it was called 30 seconds. So what we're going to do, and I see there's a number of points of order, is we're going to rerun the vote, but it will be 30-second vote. So, just to be clear, the question is that Amendment 36 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? We are not agreed. There will be a division and members should cast their vote now. The vote is now closed. Thank you. The result of the vote on amendment number 36 in the name of Natalie Dawn Innes is yes 86, no 23. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore agreed. I call Amendment 136 in the name of Willie Rennie, already debated with Amendment 35. Willie Rennie to move or not move?
Moved.
Moved. The question is that Amendment 136 be agreed to. Are we all agreed?
Yes.
The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 137 in the name of Willie Rennie, already debated with Amendment 35. Willie Rennie to move or not move?
Moved.
Moved. The question is that Amendment 137 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 37 in the name of the Minister, ready debated with Amendment 35. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 37 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is not agreed. There will be a division and members should cast their vote now. The vote is now closed. Thank you. The result of the vote on amendment number 37 in the name of Natalie Dawn Innes is yes 87, no 23. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore agreed. I call Amendment 138 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 35. Martin Whitfield to move or not move? Move. The question is that Amendment 138 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 139 in the name of Willie Rennie, already debated with Amendment 35. Willie Rennie to move or not move? Moved?
Yeah.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 139 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 38 in the name of the Minister, ready debated with Amendment 35. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 38 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 140 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 35. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Move.
Move. The question is that Amendment 140 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is not agreed. There will be a division and members should cast their vote now. The vote is now closed. Point of order, Audrey Nicholl.
My vote is a yes.
Thank you, Ms Nicholl. Your vote will be recorded. Thank you. The result of the vote on amendment number 140 in the name of Martin Whitfield is yes 84, no 23. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore agreed. I call amendment 39 in the name of the Minister. Ready to debate with amendment 35. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that amendment 39 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call amendment 40 in the name of the Minister. Ready to debate with amendment 35. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that amendment 40 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 2 in the name of Willie Rennie. Ready to debate with Amendment 35. Willie Rennie to move or not move?
Not moved.
Not moved. I call Amendment 141 in the name of Willie Rennie. Ready to debate with Amendment 35. Willie Rennie to move or not move?
Moved.
Moved. The question is that Amendment 141 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 3 in the name of Willie Rennie. Ready to debate with Amendment 35. Willie Rennie to move or not move?
Not moved.
Not moved. I now call Amendment 142 in the name of Willie Rennie. Already debated with Amendment 35. Willie Rennie to move or not move?
Moved.
Moved. The question is that Amendment 142 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 41 in the name of the Minister. Already debated with Amendment 35. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 41 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is not agreed. There will be a division and members should cast their vote now. The vote is now closed. Thank you. The result of the vote on amendment number 41 in the name of Natalie Dawn Innes is yes 85, no 24. There were no abstentions. The amendment is therefore agreed. I call Amendment 143 in the name of Martin Whitfield. Already debated with Amendment 35. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Move.
Move. The question is that Amendment 143 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 42 in the name of the Minister. Already debated with Amendment 28. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 42 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 43 in the name of the Minister. Already debated with Amendment 28. Minister to move formally.
Moved.
Thank you. The question is that Amendment 43 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 144 in the name of Martin Whitfield. Already debated with Amendment 99. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Not move.
Not moved. We now turn to Group 11 on allowances and other payments. I call Amendment 145 in the name of Martin Whitfield, grouped with amendments as shown in the groupings. And I call on Martin Whitfield to move Amendment 145 and to speak to other amendments in the group. Mr Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer. And the second exciting grouping where the Chamber has to listen to my dulcet tones as I hold all of the amendments in this section. Amendments 145 to 152 and 210 seek to address concerns that the fostering community have in relation to fees and other payments. Amendment 145 would require the Minister to make regulations about payments for foster carers. Amendment 146 and 147 seek to include payments to independent fostering agencies, IFAs, into these regulations, with Amendment 150 providing a definition of fostering services which would include such organisations. Amendment 148 would ensure that local authorities' reporting duties in relation to rates and payments paid by them to foster carers are broken down by type of payment, because this would ensure there is full transparency. Amendment 149 requires regulations on payments and fees to make provision for Social Care and Social Work Improvement Scotland's duty to monitor and report on payments made by local authorities and IFAs. Amendment 152 would require Scottish ministers to, either by regulation or otherwise, ensure that Social Care and Social Work Improvement Scotland includes gathering information on fees and other payments as part of the inspections. Amendment 151 includes payments made to kinship carers in uprating requirements. I brought these amendments because fostering is hugely challenging, but it is also incredibly valuable and too frequently the forgotten profession that underpins the care for experienced young people. And this bill has provided an opportunity for the first time in a long time both to acknowledge the contribution that foster carers make, and we must ensure that, whatever the outcome of these amendments, there is further work following this bill to appropriately recognise foster carers, to appropriately support foster carers, and to appropriately protect foster carers in certain situations. And I look forward and welcome the commitments that the Minister can make before I consider moving or not these amendments. But to start the ball rolling, I move Amendment 145 in my name.
Thank you, Mr Whitfield. I call on the Minister.
Presiding Officer, I'm happy to support Martin Whitfield's Amendment 148, which helpfully separates allowances, fees and other payments. However, I cannot support the others in this group. What I would start by saying is that I echo the comments of Mr Whitfield. I absolutely acknowledge the immense contribution that foster carers have and play in supporting our children and young people. Amendment 145, however, is unnecessary. Ministers have already made regulations, the Looked After Children Scotland Regulations 2009, which make provision in relation to payments to carers and can utilise that power should policy development informed by consultation support a national fee framework. Amendments 146, 147 and 150 would enable ministers to make regulations about payments made by a fostering service to foster carers and place a publication requirement on them. I feel this would be inappropriate and also unnecessary. Fostering services carry out functions towards looked after children on behalf of local authorities. They are contracted under arrangements with local authorities for that purpose. Where ministers specify rates under the 2007 Act in respect of payments made by local authorities to carers, those rates will apply to all fostering services. It would therefore not be appropriate for ministers to interfere with the arrangements local authorities make with fostering services. The written agreements provided for under the Looked After Children Scotland Regulations 2009 are the appropriate place for fee rates for fostering services to be dealt with. Amendment 151 would extend the new uprating mechanism in the 2007 Act beyond allowances to include foster carer fees. Ministers already hold broadened powers under the bill to regulate payments to foster carers should policy work indicate that this is the right direction. Additionally, no amendment has been lodged to make a corresponding change to the uprating provision in the 2014 Act, which relates to payments paid to kinship carers. If Amendment 151 were to be passed, it could therefore create an inequity of treatment of the financial support provided to foster carers and the support provided to kinship carers. That said, I know it's important that we continue to consider how financial support for carers evolves over time, and I am committed to engaging with stakeholders and those with lived experience to monitor implementation to ensure the system remains fair, sustainable and centred on children's needs. As I indicated, ministers already have the powers to bring forward further provision on payments if that is shown to be required, and will keep this under active review as part of our wider reform. And I also think we need to look at the bill as a whole and remember that provisions will see all independent agencies becoming charities and will be subject to Oscar scrutiny, and that includes financial behaviours and information. Finally, on amendments 149, 152 and 210 would significantly extend the Care Inspectorate's remit and statutory role by asking it to monitor fee and allowance levels. It's not clear why that would be appropriate for the Care Inspectorate to undertake, nor what purpose that would serve. None of these amendments have been subject to the consultation or the scoping that would be needed to assess the workload, the capacity or the cost. And crucially, for independent foster agencies, which through the bill will be required to be charities, as I've said, financial oversight is already the statutory responsibility of OSCAR. Placing parallel duties on the Care Inspectorate would duplicate responsibilities and risk confusing accountability, I believe. So for these reasons, I would encourage Mr Whitfield not to move amendments 145, 146, 147, 149, 150, 151, 152 and 210. And if he does, I invite members not to support them, but I do encourage members to vote for Amendment 148.
Thank you, Minister. And I call on Martin Whitfield to wind up and to press or withdraw Amendment 145. I'm
very grateful, Deputy Presiding Officer. I would perhaps invite the Minister, and I put it down absolutely that it was my misunderstanding. There is absolutely no intention for the individual fostering families to require to register as charities to be covered by this. I'm sure that is correct, isn't it? And that the charitable status was in relation to the IFAs. I thank the Minister and indeed at stage 2 and discussions in between, because I do believe the Minister absolutely recognises the importance of fostering. I think what is important is that whoever sits in Scottish Government and going forward with regard to keeping the promise by 2030, more work is done to support our fostering communities in the wider sense of the word. And I welcome all of the commitments that the Minister has made in relation to that. I am conscious... I'm
Minister.
more than happy to.
It's really just to point to the ongoing work on a non-legislative space as well, in terms, so you might be Mr Whitfield might be getting on to this, but just in relation to the future of foster care and the work that's been undertaken in that space. So I would just like to emphasise that as well.
Martin Whitfield.
I welcome the confirmation, and indeed I know that the fostering communities are looking very strongly at that and the opportunity to engage so that their voice is heard on a plethora of matters, but it is about supporting a very essential element within Scotland's ability to keep the promise going forward. I am conscious of time, Deputy Presiding Officer, so on that I would seek the Chamber's permission to withdraw Amendment 145.
Thank you, Mr Whitfield. Martin Whitfield seeks to withdraw Amendment number 145. Does any member object? No member objects. Amendment 145 is therefore withdrawn. I now call Amendment 146 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 145. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Not move.
Not moved. I now call Amendment 147 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 145. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Not move.
Not moved. I now call Amendment 148 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 145. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Move.
Move. The question is that Amendment 148 be agreed to. Are we all agreed? Yes. The Parliament is agreed. I call Amendment 149 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment number 145. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Not move.
And I call Amendment 150 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 145. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Not move.
Not moved. I call Amendment 151 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 145. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Not move.
I now call Amendment 152 in the name of Martin Whitfield, already debated with Amendment 145. Martin Whitfield to move or not move?
Not move.
Not moved. And at this point, members, I can give the glad tidings that we will have a comfort break of 20 minutes, and therefore we will see you back after our suspension at 18:15. Thank you.